Welcome to CAD Talks, tackling issues in your community.
Record these, but so many people can't be here because of work or whatever reason, we do get quite a big uptake on people wanting the recording. And they're really important, these talks, because we need to open up a little bit more about why things happen. Why aren't we talking more about these topics? What's the elephant in the room? I love that expression. So anyway, I'm going to introduce the speakers today. And if one by one, as I call them out, if they can just say a little bit about what they do, just a couple of sentences is all we need because we haven't got much time. So first of all, top of my list, Jaffa.
Good morning, everyone. I just had to check my time to see whether we were in morning or afternoon, but we are still in morning. So my name's Jaffa. Feel free to call me Jaff. So I work 3 days a week for my local authority as a Children and Young People's Participation Officer, and also spend 2 days a week as a personal development coach and trainer.
Fantastic. And next on my list is Zara. Do we have Zara with us? Oh, yes, I can see Zara. Yeah.
Hi there, good morning, Jackie.
Hi.
So I'm Zara. I work for Merseycare NHS as an assistant psychologist and also volunteer for SEED, which is support and education for eating disorders. And that's what I do around my full-time employment.
Fantastic, Zara. And we've got Nazma.
Morning, everyone. I'm Nazma. I'm a project officer at Lancashire BAME Network. We work on projects across Lancashire, supporting BAME, not exclusively, but supporting those that are marginalised and disadvantaged.
Great, thanks, Nazma. And Sahal, is Sahal Patel here? I can't see if he is.
No.
No, okay, no worries. Candice. Hi. Oh.
Unmute yourself, Candice.
That's what I am. Hi, I'm Kadika Benjamin, sir. I am the Race Equality Lead at Lancashire and South Cumbria, and I'm part of the wider Equality and Diversity Inclusion team.
Fantastic. And Lee Chambers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lee Chambers. So I'm the founder of Essentialised Workplace Wellbeing, and we as a company look to make wellbeing more engaging within organisations and create bespoke strategies that really look to get more people involved and make wellbeing more inclusive. And I'm also, along with Jackie, a founder of Wellbeing Lancashire.
Yay. Fantastic. I'll just check again. Has Latif managed to get on yet?
He's connecting.
Oh, he's connecting. Oh, we can come back to Latif anyway. And Sahal? No? Okay, no problem. Without further ado, we will start with the first questions. So obviously the topic today is mental health in BAME communities. And so we want to open up a conversation and find out how we, as a unit, all of us together can do it better. So the first question, I'm actually putting it out to the speakers. So if any one of the speakers wants to answer it, can you just put your hand up? It's like being at school, I know, but anyway. So question that's really, I think, is quite important is, why don't people from the BAME communities access mental health services? And I think I'm actually, just so that you know, a wellbeing manager for Lancashire BAME Network, and there is a stigma around it. So I think we need to open that up. So is there anyone of the speakers who want to answer that? Oh, Candice.
I'm trying to find the raise your hand function. I'm not doing it. I'm doing this.
It's Candice, it's participants. Morning, hi Jackie, hi everyone. If you go in participants and click on that, there should be.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, on the reactions, or you can put your hand up. It doesn't matter, just wave.
Yeah.
My excuse is I normally use Teams. I'm sticking to that excuse. Speaking from more of a Caribbean and African sense, not BAME as a whole. In a past life, I've done a lot of work with different communities, and especially around African men, and the reason why there's some of the stigma attached. And there's very much this sense of, as an African man, you are the leader of the household, you are the provider, you are the person that makes a stance for the family. And in that stance, it's the same as, I suppose, the lion in a pack. There's no room for weakness. It almost, in some senses, that doesn't allow them to be human. You know, it's not seen as manly to cry. It's not seen as manly to crack under pressure. You're there to find resolutions to an issue. So therefore, accessing a service and is also a way of admitting that you have a problem, or that you have an issue. And that's not something that is deemed as okay. I mean, even myself, as a background as a female, you know, there's no such thing as depression. You don't get down, you deal with things. You got a headache, take a paracetamol and carry on. So there's a real feeling that people don't want to recognize that, because it's seen as a weakness, and therefore it means that they're not being a man. They're letting down the family. They're not doing what they're supposed to do.
That's so important, isn't it, to hear that, and how we're going to break down that stigma. So we have a chat room. Anybody wants to ask Candice any questions about that, or any of the speakers as we go along, can you put your questions in there? Then we can have open discussion later on. Thanks for that.
Just stop you there for a minute. Is it Paulette has just said there's also a lack of trust? If you wanted to elaborate on that, maybe.
Yeah, is any speaker want to elaborate on that? A lack of trust.
Shall I speak?
Yeah, of course.
Please.
Yeah,
Go on, Paulette, yeah.
So that lack of trust, so that when particularly black people from, say, British Black or from West Indies or from Africa do enter the mental health service, there is that fear that actually what they will see is that when they've seen other people enter it, they've entered it later on in the day and they've been very unwell, and what they've seen is people maybe being given medication as the first line of treatment, and then what you then see is them walking around with lots of weight gain, maybe looking as though they're not actually connected again, yes? And so that fear is that, well, actually, if I do go into mental health services, what am I going to come out like? Yeah? So I think, you know, there is this sort of, no, then I'm not going to get what I need, really. So therefore, yeah, stay away. You know, you can get locked up, pumped up with medication, and your life is almost over. So, you know, with that type of outlook, people will shy away from it. Yeah.
So it's like a fear then, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the trust and fear that they might go down a route that maybe they've seen in somebody else. Yeah, I can see that. As any of the other speakers would like to answer that?
Can I just say something? Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand.
Oh, no.
Just
shout out. The speakers can shout out. You don't have to raise your hand.
So just kind of following on for that, I guess there's the aspect of trust in professionals and clinicians, people within the mental health services. I think I've worked in quite a few inpatient services, and sometimes feedback has been that there aren't people represented from your own culture in the kind of professional team, and that can be extremely difficult for people. Just that kind of human to human trust, seeing people who aren't from your culture can be another added layer to kind of mistrust, feelings of uncomfortableness, and just difficulties that some people kind of really experience when they're accessing mental health services. And that's not just in inpatient services, even if it's kind of first line primary care services, that can be really difficult for people if they're not feeling as though their culture is acknowledged as well, I guess. I think somebody's put a really good question on there, that our mental health services culturally competent, and that's a massive thing in terms of the provision that we're providing.
Right, yeah. No, that's a really good point, isn't it? That already you're feeling bad. You're feeling probably at the worst you've ever felt. And then to go and access service and then feel uncomfortable again. Yeah, I understand that.
Before, usually we would go into our three main questions, but just thinking on that question that's just been asked about mental health service providers. We have some NHS in here. If any of them would like to potentially answer that question, that would be good. That was the are mental health service providers sufficiently culturally competent?
I mean, I would just say we're trying to be. I think there's definitely a shift towards that now, in terms of really appreciating and acknowledging people's culture and providing that as a professional team. I think there is a shift towards moving towards that. I think Lancashire Care did a really interesting study that I was part of a research study, looking at a culturally adapted programme, a positive health programme. It's called the Roshni 2 I don't know if anyone else from Lancashire Care have heard of this. And it's an absolutely fantastic initiative, looking at adapting provisions that we have already, so that it's available for people from a different culture. So in this case, it was South Asian women with postnatal depression, and I think that initiative, it's still running. The research study is still running, so it'd be interesting to see what we find with that. But it's really interesting to see that's happening now. We are shifting towards taking the provision that we have and adapting it for people from other cultures.
That's great, Zara, yeah. And a note from, so I said earlier that I work for Lancashire BAME Network. I'm an holistic therapist, so I'm very passionate about doing things naturally anyway. So we've introduced different ways of doing counselling in an holistic manner. So there's lots of different things available, which we will ask the question later, but there is lots of other types of talking therapies coming on which might suit different communities in a more of an Ayurvedic way. That's the way I think, and that's the way I deliver. So it's kind of influencing that as well, isn't it? So I think I saw Lee's hand up there. Did I see your hand, or was...
Yeah, it was just to kind of follow on from that at the kind of access point, there's the cultural elements of having to express vulnerability at that moment. Yeah. And there's still stigma around the language used, around mental health being almost related to mental illness, which creates certain almost visual patterns of what that might be. And that can decrease engagement at point. There's then decreasing engagement at credibility of providers. And like Zara just said, the NHS is starting to look at how to engage those communities in a different way that actually speaks more personally to them, is more respectful of culture. And that's important, because ultimately when you're going into that position, you do want to feel that there's an element of personalisation, an element of consideration for your cultural background, and looking more at a wider scope of understanding that people do tend to access these services at a number of different points. And from my perspective, obviously working a lot more on the elements of well-being. So, you know, from, say, a stable mental place to a more thriving mental place, well-being, it suffers a bit from a lot of the promotion being effectively white. And that Caucasian element means that in my work, I'm having to look at engagement of, you know, BAME communities in well-being. Because again, when you're kind of looking at the well-being, especially around the marketing and around the engagement, it's very much based on its target audience who are already engaged and spend the money. So a lot of my work is around how can we engage the people who are not currently engaged to actually start to look at thriving and pushing, you know, from a positive psychological perspective onwards in their lives and flourishing.
But just going off on that, and as you said about terminology, which kind of leads into our next question, is you say about mental health. Well, everybody has mental health. Because it's the same as physical health. Everybody has physical health. So I think the way the terminology is used of saying that should be changed a little, because you can have good mental health. So yes. Nobody ever says, "Oh, I've got good. My mental health is good." You know, that type of thing. So terminology, I think, is something that should be looked at, and we have started doing changes with that. We noticed in our last CAD talk that they used to use the term committed suicide. But committed is actually a negative terminology, and it's now died by suicide. So things can change, and I think it is something we should definitely be looking at.
Super.
Yeah, totally agree with that. You know, I've already been addressing that, because I can't use the word mental health because it does have negative implications to a lot of people. So I'm already using the word well-being, and well-being is massive, isn't it? It could mean lots of things, but actually, you know, your mental well-being, it sounds better, doesn't it? I think. Just
before we go into the next question, Pav, did you want to ask your question? The room. I don't. No, you're all right.
You've asked the question, so I mean, I'm fine.
Oh, okay, great.
Oh, great. Right, so I'll go on to the next question, but we can discuss other Q&As later on as well. But so the second question is, what do you feel we need to do to access the services for the BAME community? What is it we need to do? Education? How do we need to do it? What is the best way that we can work with this?
But also what's working. There might be things that people are actually already doing. What's working and what can we adapt? Yeah, Jaffa.
Yeah, so I've spent the last 5 years being immersed in another form of supporting people from where they are to where they want to be, mentally, physically, spiritually, in whatever way you want to. And that's NLP. So I don't know how many people have come across NLP. Beautiful, beautiful world, neuro-linguistic programming, something that I'm deeply, deeply passionate about. And I think for BAME communities in particular, and again, much like Candice, I can only speak on behalf of being a Pakistani man in Blackburn, and so therefore speaking about a very small demographic within that large spectrum of BAME. I think actually what NLP does is give you a lot of tools which often are content free, because I think one of the issues that my community in particular has, and this is particularly young men, so as I said, my background's in working in and around the youth sector for the last 12, 13 years, is young people don't often want to talk about their issues. What they do want, though, is some resolution and some solution to some of those issues that they might be facing. And what NLP has given me is a set of tools and techniques to support people, as I said, to move from where they are to where they want to be. And none of it's new. So the beautiful thing about NLP is that it's based on human excellence. So the founders of NLP were modeled 3 fantastic therapists in America and looked at how did they get the results that they got, and what was it? What was the difference that made the difference between them having those amazing results and other people having less amazing results? So NLP is nothing new. NLP is stuff that we do in everyday world, but unfortunately, I think it's been hijacked by those within the corporate business sector in particular, as a way to manipulate people, as a way to sell stuff, as a way to really get people to think about things in a very, this is the right way to do things, all that kind of stuff. And I think actually NLP would be a lovely addition to some of the existing long-term strategies that we've got: counseling, talking therapy, CBT, etc. And so I'm massively an advocate of NLP, and that's something that for me would be wholeheartedly, if I could develop a mental health service from scratch, that would be at my very foundation. And in addition to that, it would be some of the stuff that you do, Jackie, some of the stuff that Lee does, making sure that it's a really complementary set of therapies to support people.
Would you agree with that, Latif? Because you're a NLP master, aren't you?
I think for me, just listening to various people speaking, that bit about the stigma is still a huge thing, especially with families in particular. So sometimes if somebody is going to have a little bit of courage to go and seek some advice or maybe take that first step, sometimes family members, because of what their perceptions are, so if they've got a son or a daughter, how it's going to come across that somebody in that household is, in inverted commas, suffering from depression, and what that's going to look like to the extended families and all those sorts of things. So there's quite a lot of barriers still. NLP, as Jaffa said, it's really good. It's something I use as well. But in terms of, I don't know if there's a quick answer in terms of how we're going to get more people to access the services. We've talked about institutional elements of certain challenges. We've talked about community perceptions and bridging that gap. There has been a number of projects that have started, well, they've been running for many, many years across the UK with various different results. So I think if we're discussing the stuff about how we can either create more awareness or engage more people, I think it would be down to much more of a micro local level and building that trust and having more people within the community speaking out who have actually been there and people can relate to. So Jaffa said, if you've got young people that have taken upon some of these core services, maybe somehow create a program of having them as the ambassadors to lead in terms of what it has done for them, maybe even talk about some of the challenges and how they can inspire some of the other people. And that's just one group, so it might not be just young people, or maybe Asian women over between 50 and 60 and those sorts of things, and how they've coped with having those discussions within the household, because sometimes not everybody fully understands what somebody else is going through. You've got the kind of the invisible weight of the shoulders on your community, extended family, close brothers and sisters, and what it looks like. So they used to be I think we've transitioned a lot from keeping it all quiet, hidden, to actually talking a lot about it a lot more, but not every family is the same.
Yeah, I think it was one of the reasons why these CAD talks are really important, because it's rather than having one community talking to one community about what's needed, this is a whole wide spectrum of the communities talking as one and working out what might be good for one group that has not even tried, can be tried with vice versa and things like that. And that's how we form the best solutions. Nazim, did you have your hand up there? Yeah.
Yes, I did. So I also work with a kind of an area of BAME people. So I don't know why it's ended up with I do Asian women. All my groups kind of tend to be Asian women, more relatable for me, I guess. Indian subcontinent, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Indian kind of origin. And all the projects that I've done, some of them have not been mental health related at all. It could be something like my digital literacy course I delivered. However, everything still comes back to their well-being. At some point they might open up to me, and then you realize they actually don't share this kind of information with anyone. They found me and it's like, okay, she won't know my family, she won't know my community, I can talk to her and I know it won't go further. It's again the stigma thing, and it's kind of the rumors that will come out. It's a very negative concept to have any sort of depression and things like that. One of my latest projects that I did was fascinating. I did a Bake Me Happy project, which was baking and well-being in the local community, in a local community center with some Asian women. And the actual foundation was to talk about suicide and self-harm. And we knew that if we advertised suicide and self-harm, nobody's going to turn up. Like, it just is so far from their thought process. They wouldn't even think that it's anything to do with them. However, they came along because I advertised it as baking. So I got them in, and then we started having these conversations. And then all of a sudden they all knew someone, or it affected them. They were worried about their children growing up, and one was concerned about her daughter self-harming. And it's like, it actually impacts everybody's life. And it's that conversation that we had, and then they went away knowing that there's more to it. It affects everyone and them as well. And I think because there's such a stigma to it, it's brushed so much under the carpet. They just want to turn a blind eye to any mental health issues. And but we started having conversations, and now they'd happily go and talk about mental health now. So it's been really, really wonderful. Some of the other work that we've been doing at Lancashire BAME Network, obviously Jackie's touched on the talking therapies that we do, which are culturally sensitive as well. These women might feel more confident coming along to speak to somebody who knows their kind of setup in the community and their house, which they might not get from a white person, somebody who understands the kind of hierarchical system. Everything kind of boils down to, oh, I can't do this. So an English person might be like, of course you can do whatever you like. But she knows that her husband will say no, and that's no. So you kind of, you need somebody who understands that and gives them the confidence and things like that to tackle it in a more better way. We are starting some Me Happy projects, which will hopefully continue to work with BME and mental health and tackling these, like, was it Latif who said about the micro on the it's all about the grassroots level, because that's how you'll know that there's an issue in the first place. So hopefully we've got Grow Me Happy starting in the 11th, and all these projects are there to help them to start these conversations that they would never have done anyway. Yeah.
Thank you, Nazma. I see that's a great example, isn't it, of getting to community. So wouldn't normally come to you. And it's all very well doing lots of projects and advertising them as, oh, why is no one accessing them? But you've got to do it in a way that suits each individual, but also each individual community. And I think that's what we're learning today, isn't it? Which is great.
Sorry, Jay. If you were to promote it, promote in places that they would be, like maybe start promoting it in temples and mosques and where community centres local to them.
Where they'd see it, where they'd feel comfortable seeing it.
Yeah, because otherwise you'll get like, oh, I didn't know. Or if it's too far away, then it's just, you know, they wouldn't attend. So it's kind of knowing where and how to promote the projects as well.
It's all working together then, isn't it? Collaboration, and that's the key. Paulette, thanks, Nazma. Paulette, you've had your hand up for a while, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay, yeah. So, yeah, about people accessing services, and one of the things that I've been very aware of, because I work with people with mental health and I'm in the psychosis bipolar clinical network team, but one of the things that I've noticed is that really when people from the BAME community come into services, it's normally late in the day. Yes, and it's normally when they're acutely unwell. And so there's something about actually identifying at a much earlier stage, yes? And I'm thinking really around young people and around schools. So when you look at schools, when you look at who gets sent down which path, so a child comes in, they're quite troubled, yes? And the question then is, what are they going to be offered? Very often what we're seeing is that people can get excluded from the BAME community, and then they will go into maybe that special school where they're provided for, rather than maybe looking at, okay, this person's a troubled young person, what type of therapy can they access? What type of support can they access? Will they go to something like CAMS for those young children, really, yes, and their families, rather than, you know, it being left and then later on they're coming into mental health services, either through Minds Matter or through the community mental health teams, very unwell. If it was picked up much earlier, yes, and they're seen as troubled rather than bad, and given the right treatment, support, that would be more helpful. Yeah. That's my point.
Well, that's such a good point, and something I'm passionate about is about getting into schools. Why aren't we teaching kids about you know, mental well-being? Because it's part of our life.
Actually, that is something that is being looked at in Lancashire Care. There is, unfortunately, couldn't be on the talk today, but there is some of the departments that are actually looking at schools and talking about bringing in the mental health and well-being into schools type of thing. So it is being looked at the moment. It might take a while to get it in there, but it
is, like you say, if you get there before it gets to a real big problem, like Paulette said, it gets more difficult to resolve. But if you get there earlier on.
Cheryl, did you have your hand up there?
I did actually. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, it's just going back to what someone said earlier about being able to relate to the people in schools as well. So it's, you know, do they feel culturally safe speaking to people, and the people that are in schools being able to talk to them as well. Yeah,
that's so true. It's safe, isn't it? That's there's quite a few questions coming up on the chat.
So I've got all the questions written down.
You've got it. It's sorted.
I'm ready. After we've done the third question, we'll jump into everybody else's questions.
Has anybody else on question 2 want to add to that? Any speakers that want to add to it? What we should be doing?
Can I just add? Yeah, I think it's massive at that point of initial engagement, and so often the education route, people don't really want that kind of education from a massive body like the NHS without a recognisable face. If we can get people sharing their stories of accessing services and the benefits that they've generated, then they ultimately are someone who's trusted to then really spread it in the community and actually speak to people who they can relate to and explain how they went through the services. Unfortunately, that also works in the reverse way for people who've had a bad experience, and they then almost become an anti-ambassador and make people more concerned to access services. And when we're looking at accessing services earlier down the line, it is so much about finding ways to anchor into what they already culturally do, because to be able to use those anchors, like Nazma said, baking, it's a great anchor in. It's engaging. It's something that they recognise. It's something that you can put out there into the places where you get high community traffic, and it's engaging. It's something that, you know, actually piques people's interest. And so often with mental health, there's a lot of push, a lot of, you know, this is bad, this can happen to you, don't let it get to this point. Well, what do we want? We want more pull. Come and do activities, come and have some space to talk about these things, and start to actually understand that you can share this with other people in a place, you know, where there's a level of confidentiality and a space to express yourself authentically, because so often we can't actually express ourselves authentically all the time. That's one of the issues that we tend to find more in these communities, that we face challenges engaging in, that not everyone can always express themselves authentically.
Thanks, Lee. That's a really good point. We've taken away quite a lot from that question, haven't we? And I think, oh, Julia, yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, it's just so interesting to listen to all of this. And I think one of the problems is we're all talking here about people who have a stigma about going somewhere and asking for help, and asking whether it's, I call it a doctor, whether it's a therapist, a doctor, you know, holistic or not, we're going somewhere to ask for help. I think one of the things that Nazma has done as well is, you know, with the baking, it is about not just opening up, and I think this is where I see the power of that we have here, and it's almost like I personally see it as a duty and responsibility to enable people, first of all, to listen, to open their minds, to listen to their options. And then it's not only about always talking, well, what a therapist can do for you, and I'm using this word, you know, intentionally like this to draw the picture. It's not about what a therapist can do for you. It is showing them ways that empowers them to do little things at home all the time. Yes, we as therapists have to give them the tools, and we first of all need to get them through our door so that we can share that with them. But I think as we talk here, we all need to rethink, and it's something I've put onto myself big time, that I'm trying more and more to use a language that comes a lot more from talking about the empowerment from within, rather than always talking about what I have to give and put on top, because that is also where the stigma comes from. The moment we take, we have a problem. That's what, you know, everybody said here. And no, we don't have a problem. You know, we're just going through a phase. We're just developing. And yeah, so that's what I just think all of us, let's not just think from that point. I know we all want to do that, but let's speak about that more, and let's, you know, communicate in that sense more, I think, because that can help others to open up to come more as well.
Park makes an interesting point regarding that, actually, regarding the empowerment and everything. When you got to consider, like, you've got racism and sexism, but you've also got internal racism and sexism within the own communities, as we've already touched on there as well. So there are other things to be considered in that as well. I think that, so all those conversations have got to come out, but it's better to have them as a wider conversation, because, as we said before, that's how we get the integration in, and how we can get better understanding to potentially, you know, get more empowerment involved in these things. And let's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's good, Elliot. I think, you know, what Julia touched on there was about us all being accountable as well for our well-being. I mean, I'm a well-being provider, and I got to work on myself every single day, you know, and I think we've all got to admit that, and it's not just something, oh, you know, I've got, you know, mental health is not good. And to be honest, most people throughout this COVID, we've all probably suffered a little bit. We need to all be working on ourselves, but that needs to be we need to be given the tools of how to try and remain positive, which very much leads into my next question. I'm just conscious of the time, so I'm going to go on to the third question. I'm just looking, there's no other hands. Oh, no, there is. Paulette's got a hand up. Or is it a legacy?
Sorry, mistake. Yeah.
Legacy. Oh, legacy. I always do that. Right, so I'm going to go on to the third question, which we kind of touched on already, but I want to go to each speaker and ask them this question. What support is out there already? What have we got? What can we deal with right here, right now? And I think that's a really important question. So I'm going to go straight. Jaffa, you're right next door to me on this Zoom. So Jaffa, you're the first.
I think it's the fact that we've got networks like this. I think it's the fact that there are people who are aware of this issue and people who are passionate. So Julie just talking about, actually we need to start with ourselves and I think this term vulnerability has become more and more prevalent and has become a lot more in the limelight. But being vulnerable, so for me, it's about showing out my young people in particular and young Pakistani men that it's fine. We all have those good days and we all have those not so good days, and they're on a spectrum, and that is absolutely fine. And we know that there are people that we can reach out to, and we know that there are initiatives out there that can continue to support us. And I absolutely agree with, I think it was Latif or someone else mentioning it, about that very hyper-local development of initiatives and making sure that it's driven by our grassroots. So rather than us as therapists or clinicians or NHS bods or whoever going, this is the way forward, actually speaking to the community. So a lot of my work has been around engaging with communities and going, what is it that you want? And often you'll get communities going, oh, I don't know what I want. I don't know because no one's asked me that question. But actually, if you spend enough time with them, they do know what they want. It's just that they haven't been asked that question before. And so it goes back to that self-empowerment and supporting them to come up with their own solutions. And finally, I think Candice mentioned it, that will then lead to absolutely some variances. So the way we do it in Blackburn might be very different to the way we do it in Burnley, very slightly. But ultimately, it means it's being driven by the people rather than structures and whatnot.
I love that. You've hit it on the head there, Jaffa. Thank you.
Can we move to Candice, because I think you've got to go soon, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh yes, go Candice.
Well, to be fair, Jaffa said everything I was going to say. We have the services, we have community groups, not saying that they don't need more development. I think what we need to do now is work on bringing them together. So services need to get better, more equipped at speaking to communities, accessing the groups that are established, and in some cases actually helping to establish groups where we think there's a gap in information that we need to be able to adapt our services, and we need to get better at that sort of working together and the collaboration, and that way we can understand what we need to do in terms of a service to make things better. And from a community point of view, we can also have the opportunity of learning to understand perhaps what the gaps are in the community and what we can do to help the community to understand what's available and what there is on offer. So I think we've got the individual poles, we just need to sort out the bridge work in between.
Well, that's well said, Candice. Yeah, bridge work. That's so important, isn't it? Yeah, we need to be crossing those bridges together. My next person I can see is Nazma.
Yes, I think they've discovered everything. We do have a lot of services at the moment that are out there, but what I wanted to say is that, I don't feel that the number or the stats that show the mental health in BME is accurate. I think there's a lot more unreported, unrecorded, and that is because it's kept within the house, within the community, and maybe just starting there and telling people, you're not going to get help if we don't know there's a need for it. The more that kind of gets recorded, hopefully the more support that will be out there. And again, I think Candice said about bridging all that. There's gaps, but they can't be filled if we don't know what the gaps are. So it's kind of having the flow of everything. The services are there. The needs have to be recognized and dealt with accordingly. I think that, that'd be fine. carry on doing baking and things like that to help people. But again, it's just building on that and seeing. I started off as a suicide and self-harm project. However, they were talking about depression and postnatal, and I thought, okay, these ladies don't have anywhere else to talk. They want to talk. And it became a general mental health thing at the end, well-being sessions, but they needed it. They didn't know they needed it. That's the funny thing. They had no idea that they had a need, and I helped them find it. But then that's how that's what they have to do.
That's fabulous, Nazma, and that and there is more and more of this support coming out, isn't there, Nazma? And it's just making people safe and comfortable so they can feel like they can open up. I love that. Thank you, Latif.
And Jackie, some excellent input and interactions and the bridge building. Definitely agree with all that kind of stuff. In the mid-90s, I ended up graduating and went to work for what was called then the Centre for Ethnicity and Health, which was part of the University of Central Lancashire, and ended up becoming a huge department. One of the things we had in there, in terms of bridging a gap between university and the community, we had volunteers that were all trained up by different members of the team, our team, and they were known as community interactors. And these community interactors were there to bridge the gap between what people had a perception of what going to university was like, especially first generation. So there could be something implemented in terms of the model of bringing it more local, with using people from that community, sharing stories, collecting stories. They also then produced a newsletter that went out to 5 wards, which was at the time funded by European funded money. But all of that helped to amplify the message, and then that resulted eventually in more people going on open days, more people signing up for year 0 courses from non-traditional learning backgrounds, all that kind of thing. So it definitely had an impact. It took a little bit of time. It was a long-term vision. That's something that also Julia picked up on as well. I think there needs to be, similar to what Nazma mentioned, something where you have some form of activity that people can join in, not necessarily called suicide prevention or mental ill health or something like that. A lot of the talking stuff, when we talk about talking therapies, can be done on street level. Unfortunately, the kind of reduction in youth and community workers has gone down, and the resources from community centres in Hull. I know we've got these I forgot what they're called now, so youth zones. I know there's one in Blackburn. So the things that we've got, I think we should utilise those as assets and learn to tell the stories of the people that could be encouraged, could be supported, could be empowered to share those stories at different age groups. So if you look at a young age group, where is it that they hang out face to face, and where do they hang out online? Even though I know that, you know, too much social media has an impact on your well-being, but within the best thing we can do is have some way of influencing that timeline. You know, getting them to talk, and then linked to that. You know, you had Michael. Well, I've got his name now. I only forgive me for calling him by his surname. The footballer, is it Michael? Or Marcus Rashford, is it?
Marcus.
Oh, Rashford, is it?
Yeah, Marcus. So he's done this whole campaign about, you know, people going hungry and providing meals. So you've got celebrities at that level, if you want to call them A-listers, but then you might have people who are very, very well respected of a different age groups in your own communities. So the only one I can think of at the moment is to be honest with you, is kind of, but imagine you had a local lad like Amir Khan, speaking in certain communities in Bolton, for example, highlighting, getting behind a campaign, supporting, and you had the equivalent in Preston or Chorley or in Blackburn or in Leyland. So they don't all have to be on TV, but it's people that know about them. So it could be from sport team background, it could be from an education background, it could be somebody within the NHS that years and years ago, they may not have thought that their career progression was going to go in a certain way. So in that kind of inverted commas, they're demonstrating a level of success which other people can identify with. And those could be mixed in with your interactors.
Yeah. Latif, that's fantastic. And I love that. I particularly love what you said. I mean, in reference, it's like a well-being champion, isn't it? In all communities.
Yeah.
And lived experience, the stories, it gets everyone, doesn't it? And you think, oh, well, if they can talk about it, it's giving
Yeah.
permission, isn't it?
I mean, if you look at all social media feeds nowadays, they've gone from more of just a written route to a image, and now it's more written, short written, and more video. So there's lots of projects out there, and then we can tie in, say, for example, the support of local businesses that can tie some of their services in terms of creative digital media and create those stories, but in a video format, if that makes sense, in a moving format. And it can be very, very impactful. And that in itself could be a little bit of a project, like Nazma mentioned with the baking, but it could be linked to, you know, some other aspect. It could be a little movie making thing, so people are also learning other skills. So, you know, the interactors, the second part of that was I think it was like a community journalist program. So again, forgive me for using the UCLan one, but we had people from the journalism department helping to train people to go out and
everyone working together.
Yeah, share stories, write stories, and that could lead them into possible employment later on.
That's great, Latif. Thank you. Lee, tell us what you think.
Yeah, I mean, this call in itself has been enlightening, and the biggest thing that we face is adversity doesn't discriminate, and we all go through challenges. And ultimately, when we're kind of looking at what's out there at the minute, just looking at the wider perspective, there are a number of really, breakthrough and experimental projects that are currently ongoing, currently on the horizon. And I fully agree in the kind of hyper-local approach gives the ability to engage at a high level, gives a chance to build the awareness of what's there. Because again, we can't utilize something if we don't know it's there. We're unlikely to participate if it's not something that engages us. So often it's actually looking at the different communities within the communities and seeing where they spend the time and what would actually engage them. Because again, we have a different range of interests, but if well-being and mental health can be weaved into our interests and give the opportunity and space for talking therapies while doing things that we enjoy, then actually it really amplifies that message, and it encourages others to then go and speak about it in a positive light within the communities, which again expands the impact that we can have. So, I mean, again, I'm fully appreciative of the work that people are doing, especially, Nazma, Latif, Sarah. Yeah, it's absolutely great. And from my perspective, things are gradually moving in the right direction. It's very small, it's very incremental, but if we can keep working, start to look at taking the little bits of best practice from the different projects, and then start to shape that ever so slightly so it completely relates to the hyperlocal area that we're looking to approach and looking to ultimately understand. It's really sometimes about the people who are being pushed out as experts being brought back into community level and being as one with the community and being able to ultimately give a little bit of their wisdom and insight in a way that's packaged for the people that they surround. And I just feel that that is something that we continue to work on. But yeah, I'm very much enlightened and happy by hearing some of the projects that we are currently undertaking.
Thanks, Lee. It is enlightening, isn't it? And it's so heartwarming. And I think as a white person, I think the good thing that can come out of this is everyone coming together is then people are going to understand the different communities. And that's so important, isn't it? And one way of tackling racism, and I know we're not here for that, but is actually to understand each other. And that's the only way, is all coming together. Zara, is Zara still on? I can't see her on the thing. Is Zara there?
I am, yes.
Hi, Zara, sorry, you've fallen off my page.
I'm just attentively listening to kind of the absolutely fantastic discussion that everyone's having, and kind of the points that everyone are making. It is absolutely great. I think some of the things, Lee, you were just saying about, I guess, the kind of connection between community organisations and the NHS, I think for me that's massive. It's why I still kind of, although I am employed by the NHS, I do still work within the community for a charity, because to me it's absolutely important that you can have professional bodies like the NHS, but the community organisations are often the key to bridging some of those gaps, where if we're talking about mental illness or mental crisis or whatever it is, sometimes the community organisations are the ones to pick those up, to provide those safe spaces for people to discuss what they're feeling, and then to be encouraged if they do need that extra support, if they do need professional help. I think community organisations play such a key part in being able to kind of make it, to translate it, to show people what's out there, what's important, and why they might benefit from accessing whatever it is, whether it's talking therapy, whether it's accessing a wellbeing group. I know for some of the work we do in the eating disorders field, part of the kind of pre-treatment process is people accessing kind of support groups, finding other people, talking about what they're experiencing and what they're feeling, before they do even consider any form of treatment or any form of talking therapy. And I think that's kind of to bridge that gap between the NHS of professionals and community organisations. That's something that's really, I guess for me, would be really important, and to highlight that support is out there in lots of different levels, not just, I guess, the highest level of, say, treatment or, in terms of mental health.
That's great, Zara, and that's actually heartwarming to hear. You know, we want the NHS and these local communities and everybody of us all coming together, because everyone seems to be working on different projects, but they're all the same project, and everyone's sort of in different areas. We all need to bring it together, and that's really heartwarming to hear from you, Zara. Thank you. Elliot, I believe.
Yeah, it was one of the reasons we actually brought these CAD Talk things together. I've been looking at some of the questions you've been saying, and it is all right. Sorry, bye, Isma.
Hi, Isma.
Is CAD as our team? We are part of the community prevention and engagement team, but our CAD team are quite new in that we are part of the NHS, but we're a new kind of unit. And what we do is we go into the communities and we develop these community assets, so we can look at pinpointing where particular areas are of need, and either find community groups that are there and help make them sustainable, or develop them from scratch. And that'll help bring in the actual groups and everything and start bringing in these support. We do have things in place to be going in the next couple of weeks for going into the new year, when we're able to get out and actually see more people face to face, of going to those grassroots levels in the communities. See, we've already got some of the data of working out which areas, and down to ward level, of need that type of support, to then create those particular groups to give them that support. It's some of the information we did that prior to this. So that's why doing these sort of talks is actually a development for the NHS to be involved with the communities and the community groups to help bring us both together. That sort of bridging thing that you're talking about, that is what our CAD team are doing right now. And we have started doing that with Connect My Community NHS on Facebook, where we have lots of different community groups in there and other businesses that all talk about what's going on in the community, either online or offline. And I think it does prove why these sort of talks are vitally important.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note as well, talking from Wellbeing Lancashire, we're having our launch of Wellbeing Lancashire on the 5th of November, and we're looking for wellbeing providers who have the same values as the co-founders. So if any of you on here who are wellbeing providers, we have got a mission, and we want to get out to communities. We want to get out to schools, and we want to get out to businesses, but we want the right people. So if anybody wants to know anything more about that launch, and you're interested in joining us, our alliance, please let us know. I'll put my email address on here. It's something we're trying to work on, all of these things together, and we want people from all different communities. So we do have a lot of questions, haven't we, Elliot?
We have. Some of them are questions and some of them are statements. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the first one, and then if any of the guest speakers would like to answer them if they can. So I do apologise for pronunciation and names here, but we got Safraz asked 2 questions. Also, misunderstanding around the mental health being a physical health problem, which we talked about, there's a lack of understanding of symptoms such as anxiety and panic being caused by a mental health problem, but not, for example, a heart problem, which it is true that some things can actually be a health issue that could cause something that would be considered a mental health issue. So you've got to do that. As we talked about terminology, we've also got to look at that sort of thing and pinpointing where the actual answer is. Not sure if any of the other speakers got a thought on that one. Nope, great, okay.
Just on that, Elliot, I think Pav mentioned on the chat about I think it's just taking into account some of the wider issues of what could cause the symptoms. You know, Pav's put down economic hardship, wider health inequalities. So there's a lot more underlying, especially during the downturn and recessions and now COVID. It's had a very, very detrimental effect. And mixing that, everything we spoke about, probably going to get there faster, aren't you?
Okay, so next question. Again, from Severus is, what are some of the barriers of these younger people at local level being able to do this? Does anybody work with the younger people that have those thoughts of how we can reduce those barriers or what those barriers may be?
So I'll jump in here, Elliot, and Steve's already mentioned it. You know, the decimation of our youth and community sector across the last 10 years has not been helpful at all. As someone who is an avid youth worker and is proud to be a youth worker, I cannot believe the state of affairs at the minute. And it, you know, and until we sort that out, until we ever, you know, and without making it too political, until we have fully funded youth services, which ultimately will target some of these issues at their very core, then great, the NHS can do as much as they want, and community organisations. So I'm a trustee for Lancashire BAME Network as well. We can do as much as we want. I'm a trustee for a number of other charities. But ultimately, that investment needs to be there. And unfortunately, that investment isn't there at the minute. And that means not only will mental health continue to rise and mental health conditions amongst young people, but all sorts of stuff, you know young people being involved in activities that they shouldn't be, whether that's gang crime, whether that's drugs and alcohol misuse, what a plethora of issues that young people continue to be engaged in, unfortunately, because they haven't got those structures in place to support them to partake in more positive extracurricular activities. So I think we're doing as much as we can, and I reaffirm that and I reiterate that I think the people on this call and people out there are doing as much as they can with the resources that we've got, and until those resources aren't heavily invested in, then that's all we can do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think there was comments regarding the community asset model. That's what we do tend to do. I think we mentioned about doing that one as well. And the employers with working with Wellbeing Lancashire, they're doing a lot of, as Jackie will be able to mention, that working with businesses for the mental health side of things. That's something that a lot of your members do, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So next we have from Conscious One. Are communities aware of the services available, particularly for African Caribbean people? That's the thing. I think for our side of things, we need to get more information out there. When we set up Connect My Community, we found out that there was a lot of people who were offline that didn't have an online provision. So and didn't know how to use it. So being able to teach them how to use the online as well as the offline, so in cases like this, is that sort of education. That's for me, there is things out there. There's these things out there for every single person, for every single need. But do we all know where they are? No. The problem with having a database of things is the data is only relevant the moment you input it in. If something closes, the link is pointless. And as a service user, if you get sent 4 links and 3 don't work, you ain't going to open the 4th, and you lose a lot of trust. So having something bringing these communities online, so to speak, would actually help it, because then it'd be live information. And I think that's one of the ways to be able to open up that communication with people, is bringing them more online, especially now when when we're in tier 3, potentially going into tier 4. You know, so we need to be thinking about those sort of things. But anybody else got a thought on that one?
Well, yeah. So speaking from Lancashire BAME, being the wellbeing manager there, we are desperately trying to get to all different communities, and that has been a problem. As Conscious One mentioned, we want to get our therapies out to everybody, and it's a free service. It really is. So we've got talking therapies, counselling, we've got befriending, and we've got a bereavement service. So anybody on here who wants to take my email address, I can send you posters and things to put in your own communities. We want to get it out there to as many people as possible. And also with NASMA, we're doing these amazing group therapies as well. And we're open to ideas, and massively important that we all collaborate. I'm very, very passionate about that. You know, with Lancashire BAME, it's there. Please just ask, because I can't get to everyone. I'm trying to get to as many people as possible, but it's not enough. So if you know of anyone, get back to me. Thank you.
Relatively for the questions, we've kind of answered a lot of the questions in the questions and answers that we've done and everything. Regarding the you know, the NHS trying to stop in the volunteer section to do things for free, it would be great, but what we've seen is a lot of service users who use it don't have any money, so it's that chicken and egg. So what we tend to do with the community groups we work with is, if they provide their services, we can help them access funding and things like that. So we do funding clinics. We're always sharing links about any funding information. If we can help them with that and help them with all their other side and thing. Well, you know, I'm not from accounting, so I can't comment on that one. You know, so but I know we don't. Our department doesn't have it. But I totally get that one. But yeah, so has anybody got anything else? Just while we've got a couple of minutes left.
Oh, Pav?
I'm Pav. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm slightly astonished to hear this issue of NHS funding. I work in the NHS too, and I'm astonished to hear that the funding isn't there. The funding isn't being targeted. That's a different question. And I think a case has to be made. And I think, my background is also in voluntary sector, voluntary community work. And I'd say this, that I hope this organisation, this group today, that people have come together, do one thing, it's to make a bid for funding to resource activities that will do this work. Because for too long, what's happened is that BAME communities, and I particularly talk about BAME communities, have not been accessed or encouraged to use services in quite the same way. The services haven't been targeted in quite the same way, or in a way that's accessible to people. And so people haven't taken advantage of those services. And so you have left people, to deal with their issues on their own. And I'm not targeting I'm pointing fingers at anyone on this call. I'm just saying that, what's been happening. And as a consequence of that, people have obviously, gone down rabbit holes almost in terms of experiences and the way that they deal with certain realities. And, that resilience that we've built within our communities, those resilience are war wounds. That's how I see it. Every single battle we fought, and often without support, statutory support. And what's really curious and interesting for me is when BAME people do start using services, and there is a really high demand, and there's a really high intense need, sometimes I've noticed the resistance that service providers, the narrative of, well, there are other people to help. That narrative I've also seen and heard. I work in equalities in the NHS for Lancashire Care, Lancashire South Cumbria Trust. So I'm just being very candid that those comments are being made by practitioners and it's really important that we challenge that. And for communities to say, actually, if you want us to do work on if you're serious about tackling health inequalities and mental health inequalities in particular, then you must ask the trust to fund it. You must ask the trust to fund it. The government tells us lots and lots that there's invested millions of pounds into mental health services. Well, let's see some of that money coming into our communities, please, into BAME communities, to meet particular projects or fund particular projects. And I appreciate that's a big task thing probably achieve on the call today, but I'm just reminding people that that mechanism exists, but you have to make the ask. And from an equalities point of view, I'd absolutely support it, of course, but that ask needs to come, and I will happily help you support, that demand inside.
That's good.
So that's a word of encouragement rather than anything depressing you.
Yeah, no, that's good, Pav, isn't it? We need to know that, and I think, like you say, I think there is resources there, and we just need to target it in the right place, and the right people need to come forward as well. That's important. The people that can deliver in a way that's going to be kind of accepted, I suppose. So thank you, Pav. That's great. This has been fantastic. I don't know about you, but I've learnt loads. And is there any more questions, Elliot?
No, that's the end of the questions. I think we are going to wrap up. We have our next one, our next CAD Talk is next month. Tickets are available for free, obviously, on Eventbrite, and it is going to be emotional eating and stigma.
Elliot,
yes,
sorry,
of course.
Can I just ask, so based on today's discussion, which has been great, what's the ideas for a follow-up? What's to happen with all these lovely comments and suggestions, and will there be actions? If so, by whom?
Well, what we do with these is once these have been completed, we get them all onto our we get our IT guy to do a little play with it, get it onto like a video, and then we get the video out there so a lot more people can access it and everything. And what we do hope is that using that information, we can then look at what's going on, and it helps with research. We can identify some of the issues that we talked about at the beginning, and that information can be passed on to other departments that are working on these type of things as well as us, because we do a lot of hotspotting and things. So that's the reason we do these talks, so we can highlight a particular area, have all of the people that are involved in the areas that might not know about each other to have those conversations, so then we can kind of work together to one goal in actually solving them. And so it's done. It might just seem like a little chat, but there's a lot of a lot of stuff going on behind it, because I think a lot of people take a lot from it, and I think with there is a hope that any information here that's been taken, that people can like move forward with it and know a lot more now than they did before the call.
And inspiring people, isn't it? It's actually giving people hope that actually we can do something and we can do it together. I think the willingness is there, and it's but recognizing that actually people do want to help from all communities, and if we can all do it together as a collective. I keep saying that, I keep repeating myself, but I think it's so important. I want to mention Wellbeing Lancashire. Well, Lee, who was on before, I think he's gone now, but he does a calendar. Can I just put it in front? And he did October, and he's done November, which anybody wants it, please just email in. And it's absolutely brilliant because it's so positive. Just for example, on the 1st of November, count how many people make you smile today. I know these are really simple things and it seems a bit cheesy, but actually you wake up and read something on your calendar every day, it just cheers you up. And that's on a person. I talked about being accountable, because every wellbeing provider here works on themselves every day. Every person should do that. So anybody want this calendar, please ask and we'll send it on. But I have loved today. I hope you have. And Elliot.
What we will do, sorry Jackie, what we will do is we've got all your email addresses that have signed up, is once the video's ready, we'll send you a link over so you can access it and share it, and then
that's a great thing, isn't it? Yeah. So without further ado, thank you so much for coming in, and I'm going to do the recording. I'm going to get it across to Elliot today. That's my promise. I've said it now out loud. I have to do it, and let's get it out there. Let's spread this far and wide, so we can all get and help each other. Any ideas as well? You've come off here and you think, oh, well, actually, I wish I'd said this. Please email in. You've got our email addresses, because we want everybody's idea, and that's what's important about it. It's about everyone working. Thank you, everybody. And if there's no more questions, we'll see you in a month's time. And thank you for the speakers. Sorry.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
I'll catch you on Twitter, pal. Thanks
Bye,
a lot.
everyone.
Thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Jackie.
Cheers,
Thanks,
Lucy.
everyone.
Thanks, Elliot.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Jackie.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Our next CAD talk discusses emotional eating and stigma. See the Eventbrite for details.